Welcome, colleagues. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our distinguished audience today. We are very happy to have each one of you as part of this webinar. We want to know more about you, so please introduce yourself in the chat, as some colleagues are doing already, sharing your name, your organization, and where are you connecting from today. I am Claudia Olavarria. I am part of the Global Evaluation Initiative team, and I will be your facilitator today. The webinar you are attending today is named Evaluation and Gender Equality: Why we need more feminist evaluation. And it is an invitation from the Global Evaluation Initiative, together with our colleagues and friends from Global Affairs Canada, from the United Nations Population Fund, from UN Women, and from the Center for Learning and Results from South Asia. And it is an invitation to join a conversation about how evaluations can better contribute to achieving gender equality. Why do we think, and we're all convinced, that more feminist evaluation is needed for this? And what have we learned in our work so far? So this webinar is part of the communication and knowledge management work that GEI does, and it's framed on the Feminist Innovation in M&E project. And today we will have 4 presentations from our esteemed colleagues here that I will introduce to you in a little bit of time. And we will also have a space to interact with you using a poll. So please be ready to participate and share your views. If you have any questions or comments during the presentation, please use the chat. We will be looking at it, we will be collecting the questions, and we will have a moment to answer them after the 4 presentations are done. So this is enough from me. And now I will pass the floor to our host today to welcome you all. Dugan Fraser, the Program Manager of the Global Evaluation Initiative, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Dugan. I am the Program Manager of the Global Evaluation Initiative. We are a partnership. We work together to promote transformation of evaluation so that it becomes more useful and more helpful and is better embedded in country-level governance systems. But we're not only trying to transform evaluation, we're in fact trying to transform the world. And we believe that one of the most powerful tools and movements to help transformation is the movement that supports gender equality. And we see feminism as an important component of the movement towards gender equity. We think that evaluation is a very, very powerful instrument. And the best part of it all is that we are not alone. We have a crowd of colleagues that we work with closely. And this webinar is an example of that. We are hosting this today with our colleagues at Global Affairs Canada, which is a very important partner to the GEI, but along with the UN Population Fund, with UN Women, and of course, one of our very, very close traveling companions, which is the CLEAR Center in South Asia. And we believe that gender equality can be achieved through evaluation, and that better evaluation is achieved through greater gender equality. We know that the world's progress has slowed, that COVID was a terrible roadblock, and we have to rethink and re-strategize and work harder to achieve the things we think are important. And our understanding is, as evaluators, I'm sure you're all familiar with the notion of the Hawthorne effect. The Hawthorne effect is the belief that when people know they're being observed, they behave differently. And we think that when we do evaluation with a feminist lens, that we encourage certain kinds of change, because we remember that when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, as Albert Einstein put it. We think that feminism is an enormous asset. We think that we could use it really well as a way to inform evaluation and other aspects of governance. And we're very excited to hear from our panelists. I'm going to leave it at that. I want to thank them all for their brain power, for their time, and for their energy. And I think maybe more than anything, we want to really thank everyone who's attending the webinar. If you weren't listening and participating, there would be no point of any of us being here today. So thank you, everybody. And back to you, Claudia.
Many thanks, dear Dugan, for this warm welcome. Indeed, we're not alone today, and look at how many colleagues from diverse sectors from diverse countries are accompanying today and willing to be part of this conversation. So now let me introduce you to our first panelist. She's Silvia Grandi, and she's the Deputy Director of Evaluation in Global Affairs Canada. Dear Silvia, please help us understand why is feminist evaluation important to advance the challenges that the great challenges that the world is facing today, and what opportunities and what challenges has Global Affairs Canada identified so far to use feminist evaluation. Dear Silvia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Claudia, and really a big thank you to GI for hosting this panel. It's always a great privilege to be able to share our experiences and what we're learning along the way, and to be able to share it with such a diversity and rich group of participants. I'm going to try and share my screen. Tried this before, seemed to be working. Okay. Before I begin, just a quick word about myself and where I work and what we do. As Claudia mentioned, I work in the Evaluation Division at Global Affairs Canada. We conduct in-house what we call our corporate or centralized evaluations of anything that Global Affairs Canada does: international assistance, trade, diplomacy. We also have a sister division that provides quality assurance, technical support to all our decentralized evaluations. These are the ones that are commissioned across the department. And finally, we have a knowledge translation unit that really helps us position our evaluative evidence around the department where it's most needed. For several years now at Global Affairs Canada, we've been at the forefront of integrating feminist or gender-transformative approaches in evaluations. We started on a solid base with gender mainstreaming, but then the Feminist International Assistance Policy in 2017 really gave us a big push to do more, do better. So we've been working since then to figure out how to do things. Where are we now? We're just completing right now our second full-fledged feminist evaluation. This is of one of the Feminist International Assistance Policy's flagship programs, the Partnership for Gender Equality. We're also still exploring how to integrate feminist evaluation principles at different levels in the variety of our evaluations. And we're providing guidance to our decentralized evaluations, both commissioners and consultants, on how to do so. Before I go any further, just a quick reminder of what we mean at Global Affairs by feminist evaluation. I feel I've presented this slide a few times already, so some of you might have already seen it. Excuse me. So for us, feminist evaluation makes gender equality central in all stages of an evaluation. It fosters an inclusive, participatory, and intersectional approach. It helps enhance our understanding of how to achieve transformative change. It promotes ownership and tries to shift power within the evaluation process. It acknowledges the privilege that we have in evaluation processes, as well as the power dynamics at play. And finally, it pushes us as evaluators to play a more active role. We like to say an activist role, actually. And so really to see evaluation as a driver for change. So let's come to the big question. Why is feminist evaluation important in the current global context? Why do we need more of it? I know I'm singing to the choir here when I say that gender equality is not only a fundamental human right, but it's also a prerequisite for a peaceful and prosperous world. This is front and center in our commitments to the SDGs and in Canada's Feminist International Assistance Policy. As Dugan mentioned, however, well, we've seen in the last decades progress towards gender equality and women's and girls' rights. we're nowhere near on track to achieving gender equality by 2030. As Dugan mentioned, we've seen some kind of going backwards a bit during the COVID pandemic, in conflict situations, and we're also facing increasingly organized and well-funded gender backlash that is really affecting progress for LGBTQI groups and sexual and reproductive health and rights. So as donors, I feel we really have a responsibility, in particular as a feminist donor, to do more and to do better. And to do so, we need to have a clear understanding of the remaining gaps and their causes. We need to better understand what works, where, when, for whom. And we need to unpack the factors that hinder or support transformative change, again, in different contexts and for different groups. As, again, Dugan was saying, this is the job of evaluations. Evaluations are a powerful tool to do so. But if I may, feminist evaluations are even better for this job. And why I'm saying this? Two main reasons. Feminist evaluations are more insightful, or can be more insightful, by focusing on gender, really those complex root causes, that systemic nature, that structural nature of gender inequalities, by giving a platform to different voices and to also unheard voices, and by taking intersectional approaches and participatory approaches. These all allow us to have stronger evidence, more diverse evidence that can inform decision makers and policy making. The other element is that I think that feminist evaluation can be more impactful. Again, thanks to participatory approaches, really the emphasis that we put in having an empowering process, evaluation process. This tends to lead to more ownership and buy-in into the evaluation, and so also more uptake and use. So again, hopefully what we say in evaluations, in feminist evaluations, leads a bit more directly to change. One last point that I wanted to make is that as donors in particular, we're also facing an age of reckoning about our role. We're grappling, for example, with how to be true to decolonization or how to support locally led development. Again, I think that feminist evaluation allows us to walk the talk as far as evaluation practice is concerned in these respects, with the ideas of shifting or sharing power, and to have a really ethical approach to evaluation. I think it puts us in a better place to be donors and evaluators in this day and age. So I just wanted to give a few examples of what difference does it make for us to use a feminist evaluation approach in our recent evaluation. I would mostly use examples from our two full-fledged recent feminist evaluations. So the Women's Voice and Leadership evaluation, the Partnership for Gender Equality one. First of all, let's talk about that idea of sharing and shifting power. We've really put a lot of emphasis in our recent evaluations in working in close partnership between the evaluation team and the program being evaluated. This has created, as I was saying before, much more buy-in, much more ownership, and a constructive relationship, even when the evaluation was pointing to gaps or things that could be improved. So again, this is leading us to being able to push for change more easily within the department when we have that kind of uptake from within. We've also put a lot of emphasis on shifting power towards local evaluations and participants. In these two evaluations, one of the key lines of evidence were country case studies, and these country case studies were really designed to be led by local evaluators and evaluators that were embedded in the feminist movement. They were also co-designed with participants from the beginning to the end, including, for example, deciding what the final product would look like and how it would be used. So we kind of distanced ourselves a bit, even at the end, say, okay, this is, okay, it's useful information for us, but it's really also for you. And also we tried to create as much as we could meaningful spaces for participation throughout the evaluation process. For example, in this last evaluation, we've really tried to open up that space. It's a bit more complicated, I find, to open up, but it's around really analysis and sense-making. We organized regional workshops with evaluation participants around the world to be able to input in our reflection and fine-tuning of emerging findings. It was a logistical nightmare, but I think it was really, really worth it. The other element that I wanted to mention is how we've been trying to really understand and measure results that matter. What I mean by that is that we've been trying more and more to integrate in our evaluations approaches to measure results that are contextually relevant, participatory, that allow participants to define what matters the most to them, and that also allow to understand that non-linearity of change. A couple of examples we've used recently, and I will be happy to share if interested, is the gender empowerment measurement tool, the GEM tool that we used in our Middle East evaluation, and a framework to assess organizational capacity of women's rights organizations and their sustainability. We've also been very diligent in applying an intersectional approach to all our sampling to really make sure that we capture the diversity and the connections between different forms of discrimination in our work. Being part of the solution, that idea of being activists, what does it mean for us? It can be small things. It can be creating connections between stakeholders that have common interests and maybe we did not know it. It could be creating, sorry, I'm losing my thoughts here. It's also really making sure that we plan and we budget for inclusion. For example, when we say, yes, we want people to participate, but are we paying for transport? Are we paying for childcare? Things like that. Also ensuring that our evaluations are really platforms for diverse voices. And not only that, that when we hear messages that are really important and valid and that come from maybe people who don't have that much power, it's our responsibility to make sure that those make it to our report, to our recommendations. Again, I have to say we can change the world one recommendation at a time. So that's the power of our recommendations. And finally, another example that I wanted to mention, and this, to be honest, it was not only related to fully feminist evaluations, but a broader reflective approach that we took to our work, was to really look at how we're doing as a donor in relation to those big shifts that we said we would do. So feminist programming, locally led development. We developed analysis and assessment frameworks to analyze how well we're doing. And we've been applying this to several evaluations so that we can start making comparisons and extract good practices and lessons learned. Of course, you know, it's not all rosy. There's all challenges, new challenges. One of them is that 7 years in doing this work, it's not always easy to keep the momentum. It's not always easy to keep the internal capacity. People leave. There's new priority. Again, our feminist international assistance policy, it's 7 years old. It's starting to feel a bit old sometimes. So just keeping that momentum, it's a constant effort. Measuring transformational change at scale, as I was saying, we're trying our best to capture this gender results, but there's still so much more that we can do, especially to be able to tell the bigger story at scale. And we have increased scrutiny to demonstrate where we're really going, for example, with the Feminist International Assistance Policy. We're still facing bureaucratic hurdles, procurement for local consultants, still a nightmare. And there's still many trade-offs when it comes to meaningful participation. When it's too much, when it's not enough, when it becomes a burden. When is it meaningful to include certain people in certain conversations. So this is still a puzzle that we're trying to put together. And finally, as I was saying before, we work with many complementary agendas around beyond feminist agendas, but indigenous rights, environmental justice. And of course, all this come together nicely, but sometimes it feels a bit that there is a layering of many frameworks, one on top of the other, and can become a bit daunting for evaluators to navigate all those different elements. I will stop there. Thank you so much for listening to me, and I look forward to answer any questions. And I will stop sharing now.
Many thanks, dear Silvia, for sharing your reflections with us. A peaceful and prosperous world, as you said, needs gender equality for sure, and to help achieve this, inclusive, participatory, and intersectional evaluation is a must. Overall, thank you for challenging us to be activists for transformational change, and we echo your invitation. Let's walk the talk together. So now, please, let me introduce our next panelist. She's Karen Cadondon. She's an evaluation specialist from UNFPA, from the Independent Evaluation Office of UNFPA. Dear Karen, thank you very much for being here. And please help us understand why it's important for UNFPA to address who is being left behind within their work, and why feminist evaluation can help us understand or better address this evaluation need. Dear Karen, the floor is yours.
Great, thanks so much, Claudia. Let me just share my screen. Thanks again, Claudia, and thank you to GEI for inviting us to this important discussion. Today, I'll be sharing UNFPA's experience on feminist, or how feminist evaluation has helped to reshape our work and how we ourselves undertake evaluation. So just very briefly, I just want to go over the organization that I work for. The United Nations Population Fund is the lead agency on sexual reproductive health and rights. We work in over 150 countries and territories around the world, and we work towards 3 transformative results: ending unmet need for family planning, ending preventable maternal deaths, and ending gender-based violence and harmful practices. Our evaluation office focuses on 2 types of evaluations: centralized and decentralized evaluations, and we are critical to advancing towards the 3 transformative results. At UNFPA Independent Office in New York, I work as evaluation specialist and manage evaluations around adolescents and youth, gender equality, and empowerment. So perhaps to respond to the first question that Claudia asked, why is it important for UNFPA to address those who are left behind? Well, the principle of leave no one behind is really cornerstone to the mission of UNFPA to promote health and rights for all individuals, especially those that are most marginalized. And while women and young girls are our main target groups, we recognize that those who experience multiple forms of discrimination are also those who are furthest behind in achieving our 3 transformative results. So assessing UNFPA efforts in integrating leave no one behind is a real challenge, and capturing the nuance and complexities of exclusion and discrimination across these various groups in an evaluation requires really a fundamental shift in how we conceptualize and conduct our evaluations. So in tackling this challenge, we reflected on traditional evaluation approaches, which we found fell a bit short in capturing the varied and layered experiences and perspectives of marginalized groups, in particular young women and youth. And in adopting a feminist approach, we found that we can more effectively identify and address the needs of those furthest behind, and ultimately lead to evaluations that are more inclusive, more relevant, and impactful. So in looking at these various evaluation approaches, the underlying tenets and principles of feminist evaluation, as shown here, aligned well to the principle of leave no one behind, as they serve to empower all marginalized voices, not just women and girls. And as Silvia mentioned and well articulated, many of the benefits as well as the principles of feminist evaluation, I'll just highlight here that through feminist evaluation, it's helped us in our work to examine power dynamics, recognize the multiple identities and factors of exclusion, prioritize the participation and empowerment of the more marginalized voices in the evaluation process itself. And it's also allowed us a deeper understanding of change in these various contexts in which our interventions take place. And I think, as Sophia aptly said, it allows us really to walk the talk in our own work. So more practically, how have we translated these principles in our evaluation into practice? So at UNFPA, we recently launched the evaluation of UNFP support to the integration of the principle of leave no one behind. And while this evaluation is ongoing, I would like to share some of the key insights that I've gained so far in managing this evaluation in adopting a feminist approach to the exercise. Here's just a brief overview of the contours of the exercise, but what I really want to highlight here is in this evaluation, I really wanted to make explicit the purpose and the objectives that it will seek to enhance the meaningful engagement of what I refer here as LNOB rights holders, which is individuals who experience multiple factors of exclusion that often leave them furthest behind, and who will be the focus of this evaluation. And this evaluation intends to integrate practical and maybe innovative ways to engage these right holders throughout the evaluation. So as I mentioned earlier, feminist evaluation really required us, a fundamental reshaping, I guess, of how we conceptualize and conduct our evaluations. And underpinning this particular evaluation is the transformative paradigm. So the transformative paradigm, it's a framework that's championed by Donna Mertens, who has done extensive work in conducting inclusive, rights-based approaches to evaluation. And she actually serves as an external evaluation advisor to this particular exercise. So for this exercise, we adopted her framework to suit our evaluation needs. And akin to feminist evaluation, I just want to stress here that the transformative paradigm really centers the experience of marginalized communities. It aligns with feminist principles mentioned earlier, and it really seeks to promote social justice and social change. So in conceptualizing this evaluation, we reflected on issues around power and privilege, social justice and empowerment, to really try to reimagine an exercise that serves to address these issues directly, both in the content of the evaluation, but as well as in the evaluation process itself. So here are just some of the more practical ways that we've translated feminist principles and the transformative framework into this evaluation. So to address issues around power and social justice, we examined the power dynamics within the evaluation process itself to ensure that marginalized groups have a voice in the decision-making, and further to ensure that they have an equitable and meaningful participation. We recognize the need for their involvement from the beginning to the end of the evaluation, from its design to the dissemination of the evaluation results. And in this evaluation, we established a steering committee, and it's comprised of leave no one behind advocates and rights holders. And this comes really from this positive experience piloting a steering committee composed of young people and young evaluators in our recently concluded adolescents and youth evaluation. And in this evaluation, it allowed young people to participate in the evaluation in a different way. so as advisors and decision makers who oversaw the evaluation alongside our office. And given this positive outcome, I decided to replicate it in this evaluation. And alongside this steering committee that will accompany the evaluation in all of its phases, we are also engaging, even when behind rights holders as active contributors, as members of our reference group. We also have them as evaluators. So in our core evaluation team, we have a young and emerging evaluator, and we'll be engaging local evaluators to conduct our country case studies with the broader evaluation team. And of course, rights holders will be a critical source of evidence and insight for this evaluation. To address issues around diversity and complexity, we recognize that multiple realities are shaped by individuals' varied experiences, identities, and contexts. And to this point, we intend to use culturally competent mixed methods to collect data around these multiple realities of the human experience. And an example of this is in our Latin America country case study, in-depth case study. It focuses really on Indigenous and Afro-descendant communities. And we have contracted an Indigenous evaluator who will be facilitating peer interviews with these communities. And the benefit here really is that she's really attuned to the cultural nuances and sensitivities of these communities. And in addition, in this approach, it also empowers and contributes to building the local capacity for evaluation within these communities that we serve. So this concludes my short presentation. I hope that you've been able to glean some insights or lessons from this experience we have so far in feminist evaluation in this particular exercise, and we look forward to continuing to share our learnings as we advance along in the evaluation. So thank you again, and I give the floor back to the moderator.
Many thanks, dear Karen. It was very inspiring and enlightening to hear your presentation. UNFPA's experience is very, very interesting because leaving no one behind challenges the work of many of us. And we for sure can be enlightened to see how you have operationalized feminist evaluation and transformative principles into the practice. That's always what we struggle with. So thank you very much for that and for sharing the experience. I would again like to highlight the potential of inclusion, of participation, of questioning power dynamics and power relations that you have also brought, as Silvia just did. We have here two inspiring interventions so far that invite us to look at our own practice, at our own work differently and walk the talk. So now we would like to hear a bit from you, from the audience. We know we have a very diverse audience, and we know that how we understand feminist evaluation, feminist approaches, and gender transformative approaches can vary a lot between organizations, between regions, between individuals. So we're inviting now you to answer a poll for us to better understand two things. So please, dear Megan, if you can share questions. We first invite you to share with us how familiar you are with feminist evaluation approaches. And second, we would love to hear or to read in this case, what would you recommend to the global M&E community to expand the use of feminist evaluation? So for the first question, dear Megan, please share the question, the poll for participants to answer. There you go. You have three options: not familiar, somewhat familiar, or very familiar. Please answer. We can see all your answers here. This is very interesting. Please keep answering. We're going to take a few seconds, not minutes, for you to answer this and see. Okay, these are interesting results. So far, 51%, more than half of us, are somewhat familiar with feminist evaluation, while only 15% is very familiar. This is very important for us because the work we do aims to make sure you or the evaluation community is more familiar, every time more familiar, and knows more about what feminist evaluation is and how it works. So we're very happy that you're all joining, even if you're not feminist evaluation experts. We're very happy to have reached a wider audience, and we're thinking already about the challenges we have to make sure we can disseminate more knowledge about feminist evaluation. So thank you very much for this answer. It's indeed very enlightening for the work we do. And please share the second question, your answer to the second question. What would you recommend to make sure that the global Lebanese community can expand the use of feminist evaluation among different organizations, different sectors, different regions? What would you be thinking regarding that? And please use the chat to answer this question. We will be looking at this, at your answers at this, so please take a few seconds or minutes to answer so we can collect what would you recommend regarding capacity building, regarding dissemination, regarding spaces for debate, or whatever you think it should be done in order to expand the use of feminist evaluations. Okay, thank you very much. Capacity building, training, disseminating the principles, more events like this. I hope we have many more to come, Tamara. Building capacities, building the nomenclature. Many thanks, Florence. That's very important indeed for us to, for us as a community, not for us as GEI, for us as a community to discuss more about what does this mean and what will each of us understand by feminist evaluation. Mainstreaming feminist evaluation and convincing decision makers, for sure, advocacy and empowering is a very, very important part for us to be agents of change. Training, free key resources, free training at different levels. The chat is going very fast, so please forgive me if I just read part of your answers. We will have time afterwards to debrief and review it in detail, because as I told you, these answers are very, very important for us. Including feminist participatory approaches in data collection, super important regarding how do we do our work, promoting psychological safety in our workplaces and our evaluation work to enable minority groups to speak up about shaping this agenda, very important. As our colleagues have shown, feminist evaluation is not only useful to highlight gender-based gaps, but also to highlight all gaps from other oppression categories, as Karen just told us about how they were working with indigenous people, with youth, and several other very important groups. Okay, feminist evaluation video series on YouTube. I like that. Guides, booklets, manuals. We have tons of good ideas on this chat. Dear Megan, dear Dugan, for sure we have to take this and put it into value, because there are some great recommendations and ideas. Please keep them going. Please write all your ideas here. We will be very happy to read them. Increase funding and winning funded groups. Many thanks, Florence. That's indeed very important. Gender plus approaches are useful to design. Okay, so let's keep the conversation in the chat going. We're writing very fast all of this to use it as part of our work. Now, please let me invite you to the second part of the webinar, in which we will have the pleasure to go deeper into how feminist evaluation or gender transformative evaluation takes place at national level. What happens at national evaluation systems, and how can feminist evaluation and gender transformative spaces take there. So please let me introduce you to our next panelist. She's Florencia Tateossian. Florencia is an evaluation specialist from UN Women. Many thanks, Florencia, for being here. And please let us know about the work that UN Women is doing in Latin America and the Caribbean, and what are the learnings you have about the national evaluation capacities with the gender lens from this experience. Please, Florencia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Claudia, for the introduction, and thank you, everyone, for being here today to hear us on feminist evaluation. So I'm going to share my screen. Sorry, there we go. There we go. So today I'm gonna actually then shift a bit the conversation, because what we heard now was from donors from the UN on how, you know, we and they conduct feminist evaluation. And now it's about what's happening at the national level, what's happening at the government level, what are countries doing? Are they also conducting gender responsive evaluations? Are we collaborating with them to actually try to do more gender responsive evaluations? Because as citizens, we need to hold them accountable, right? We need to make sure that, you know, what the policies are doing, and we need to understand whether those policies are also promoting and advancing gender equality, and what best way to do it then with gender responsive evaluation, as we just heard. And I'm going to talk about the experience specifically in Latin America and the Caribbean. So just to start an overview, I'm going to, you know, talk a little bit about why this is very important, and then present a tool that we have developed in UN Women in collaboration with other institutions on understanding the extent to which national evaluation systems are actually including a gender responsive approach in the way they conduct evaluation. And then talk a little bit about the processes in Latin America that we are collaborating with from UN Women. So as I just said, national evaluation systems are very important, and they're key because they're the ones, and from those systems is where we get the evidence that are going to help decision makers, you know, produce new policies and actually enact new agendas for, in this case, gender equality and for leaving no one behind. And so in UN Women, what we do to actually collaborate with governments in this work is to first, you know, work in basically enabling the environment. So really trying to build an enabling environment for more national evaluation systems to adopt and to use a gender responsive type of evaluation. We also provide tools for assessing the way national evaluation systems are conducting gender responsive evaluations or are embedding this approach within their systems. And we also try to, you know, consider some action points, entry points in how we can perhaps collaborate with trainings and with also conducting gender responsive evaluations at the country level. So these are really our intervention areas. And in UN Women, we do this also with partners. One of them is GEI and the CLEAR Centers. We also work with EvalGender Plus, and I also am a co-chair of EvalGender Plus. EvalGender Plus is a network that actually tries to work with all the voluntary organizations for professional evaluation. And I see we have some representatives here today. I saw Ceneval there, I saw ACEVAL, AFREA also working in this area, AGDEN, our big partner also in gender responsive evaluations at the national level. And we also do this with direct support to national evaluation processes. So really providing technical assistance to national governments that are actually requesting that assistance and want to collaborate together. And we also provide, as I said, the ability to design some tools to assess how we do this, and guidances, as well as courses and trainings. And I just shared a free training that we have in UN Women on how to conduct gender responsive evaluation, which is also very helpful for anyone who is interested in that. So one of the tools that we have recently developed, and this was also part of a wider effort that exists, which is the National Evaluation Capacity Index, is a tool called the Gender Scanner. And this is actually a tool to assess and measure how the gender perspective has been integrated at the national level. So as I said, it's kind of a tool that comes together with the National Evaluation Capacity Index, which is an index that has been put in place by WFP, by DEVAL as well, and other institutions to measure the degree to which a national evaluation system, how much they have basically, to what extent, the strength of their evaluation system, basically. And so the gender scanner is actually the strength of their gender incorporation in that evaluation system. So it provides a set of questions for a self-assessment. So the members of those, of all the institutions that are part of national evaluation systems, respond to certain questions and self-assess themselves in terms of certain variables, which I'm going to go into that just now. It's a very useful tool. It's easy to use. It can be replicated. And actually, we have a quick guidance to do this. It also provides a data set. So with all this information, we can identify trends and strengths and gaps in the different types of evaluation systems that exist around the world. And it's an evidence-based exchange, right? Different actors can actually exchange on really, with evidence on, what are the strengths, what is needed, and what can we do better. So this is, again, to go a bit more in detail on what this scanner is about and what it measures, the variables it measures. So it's really about what's the structure of all the institutions in a country, right? Do they have gender specialists to conduct evaluations? Are they looking at the frameworks that are related to gender equality? CEDAW, Beijing Platform for Action, SDGs, SDG 5. Then what's the supply of evaluation capacities in that certain country? Because we are conducting an evaluation, we need to know if we have gender responsive evaluators in the country, for example, to do that. What's the quality of the data that exists also in the country? Do we have disaggregated data that can be used to conduct evaluations to really understand how we advance in gender equality? And then the dialogue spaces, right? And so we're trying to understand whether the institutions that are in charge of evaluation in a country are talking to civil society organizations, to women's machineries, to the civil society women's movement. And so that also creates these multi-stakeholder dialogue spaces that helps advance evaluation in a country. And the use of evaluation. Are we using the evaluations that the country is actually conducting to progress and to advance gender equality? I think that's the main one, the most important one. And we are always discussing among ourselves about, we produce all these very beautiful reports, but are we using them? Are they really making an impact, a difference? And so once we have all these variables and these percentages, this gender scanner actually puts them in a, with a classification on whether that system is completely gender blind, gender limited, gender sensitive, or gender transformative with a percentage. And so this gives us, it's a tool to assess and then to also work collaboratively with that system to say we need more, we need less, perhaps we can help us with a training, perhaps we can help us with conducting an evaluation. And so just to give you very quickly some examples of what we're doing, at the moment UN Women is working with Ecuador on evaluating their gender policy of the armed forces and from a gender perspective. So this is really to understand whether this gender policy has been effective, whether the expected results have been achieved, identifying recommendations, and also applying the scanner. And this scanner is to understand to what degree all the institutions that are involved in evaluating these policies and that are connected are really doing it, and have the tools and have the capacities from a gender responsive approach. In this case, we're doing it before and after, because the evaluation is also having a bit of a developmental approach in that it's providing training also to the people from the different institutions. So we're trying to understand if all of that is making a difference at the end of the evaluation process. And other processes that we're working on in Latin America are in Panama and in Paraguay, where we are also, from the UN Women side, providing some support for the evaluations of national public policies on equal opportunities for women in the case of Panama, and also the evaluation of the National Equality Plan in the case of Paraguay. And both have this focus on strategic learning, decision making, and really understanding, how much that country has progress in gender equality. And in UN Women, we support this together with Eval Gender Plus in many other countries as well. We have examples. We have worked in Colombia for a long time, in Latin America, but also in Serbia, for example, in other regions of the world. And this is it for me today. So thank you very much. And any questions you have, don't hesitate to ask. And these are just some guidances and tools, and I'm going to send the links through the chat as well for anyone who is interested. And thank you so much. And I'll pass the floor to Claudia again.
Many thanks, dear Florencia. It's great to see the work that UN Women is doing in Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as other countries out of the region, as you just mentioned, because you can clearly see how this is a systems issue, how there are many stakeholders, many actors. You mentioned VOPIs, you mentioned governments, as many others that are involved and that need to take an important role into this movement, or into this need of making evaluation more influential towards gender equality. So thank you very much for sharing. Thank you very much for sharing the tools that are always very important for us to do our evaluation work. And thank you very much for sharing the cases. I was reading the chat. That's a great space for knowing what people are thinking about you. I strongly recommend that you all go through it before you leave this webinar. But there in the chat, people are discussing a lot about how this should be done. How should we make definitions? What practical steps should we take? And I think tools are very, very important in order to achieve that. So thank you very much again, Florencia, for sharing. And I hope we have another space to go deeper into these examples, because in the chat, I clearly see that there is a lot of people wanting to check examples, cases, how things work, what things didn't work, that also can be very, very enlightening. Now, I will introduce our next speaker, our next panelist. She's a lead into the Center for Learning and Results from South Asia, Clear South Asia. Her name is Sohini Mookherjee. Please forgive me, Sohini, if my pronunciation is not right. Please let everyone know the right pronunciation.
You did great. You did great.
Good. Thank you very much. Sohini will share with us the experience of Clear South Asia, with a focus on how the things that Florencia is helping us to understand get operationalized at a national level. What changes should happen in a national evaluation system and in an organization that works using more gender transformative approaches into their evaluation work. So Sohini, please let us know, help us understand this, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Claudia, and thank you to GEI for having us in the panel, and also a very interesting discussion. So it's always difficult to go last. So I think, as Claudia mentioned, what I'll do is talk a little bit about, so really shift gears, talk a little bit about gender transformative evaluation, and particularly the work that we are doing at the local level. We are also going to shift a bit geographically from Latin America to South Asia, where most of our work is. So just to get started, I would first quickly talk a little bit about the work that we do at Clear South Asia. So as Dugan mentioned, Clear South Asia is one of GEI's fellow travelers. We are one of the core implementing partners of GEI. And our broader mission is to institutionalize evidence use by building MEL systems and MEL capacity, both amongst the users as well as the generators of evidence. We also do a lot of work with the government directly by setting up MEL systems and frameworks within the government. In terms of the geographical spread, we do a lot of work in India, in Bhutan. We have also done a lot of work in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Pakistan previously. And in terms of our approach towards our work, so we first begin by doing landscaping, diagnostics, exercise to unpack needs, opportunities, barriers to building MEL platforms. I think this is something that Florencia had just mentioned about the value of doing diagnostics. GEI also has an M&E systems analysis or MESA tool that it's publicly available if you want to use and customize for your own work. But then this diagnostics exercise then influences the capacity building or technical advisory support that we provide to the government. And typically these are long-term engagements, because that really helps us to provide that hand-holding support to the government that is needed for system strengthening. And then finally, we do a lot of work on knowledge dissemination as well. So I want to maybe take a step back before I answer Claudia's very important question. Just take a step back in understanding what we mean by gender transformative MEL and how is it different from other terminologies that may be used in the sector. So I think first is you can do evaluation which is gender blind or gender neutral, which doesn't take gender into consideration. So in a way, these evaluations can reproduce systems of gender inequality. Then you can do some sort of gender aware or gender sensitive evaluations, which takes gender dynamics into consideration, but it doesn't challenge unequal power dynamics. So in a way, you're making some progress, but at the same time, when we think of gender transformative evaluation, as Florencia was talking about, it seeks to challenge and transform unequal power structures that are based on gender, right? So what does that work really entail? And here, again, I'm going to spotlight on few features that we kind of keep in mind when we do our work in Clear South Asia. This is in no way an exhaustive list. But I think the first starting point is a participatory approach, that you want to involve representatives from the marginalized communities to identify what would constitute gender transformative change in a context in which you're working in. So what that means is, if, for example, you're doing an evaluation, you might be using an internationally recognized tool to measure constructs like agency empowerment, but you cannot use the tool as it is. You want to pilot it and see what it means for the context in which you're working in. The second aspect is the cross-sectional or the intersectional approach. So you want to develop gender-specific indicators in other sectors like health, like environment, etc., and ensure that the programs benefit the women, the LGBTQ+ community in different intersectional groups. So just to give you an example, 6 out of the 17 SDGs do not include gender-specific indicators, right? So if it doesn't use, this omission can lead us to us assuming that gender outcomes don't matter for them, which is far from true. The third aspect is measuring care and well-being, so that you are enhancing the inclusiveness of your programs, because the women and the marginalized communities face higher risk. I think one point that has been discussed quite a bit in today's panel is the gender disaggregated data, right? That program impacts can vary by gender. And a number of evaluations have shown that when researchers reanalyze the data using the gender disaggregated data sets, the outcomes don't hold true. The outcomes that might happen, that women may have, might differ from that of men. So I think that's also an important aspect to keep in mind. You want to do systematic tracking of gender-related outcomes like norms, like attitudes, like women's agency, empowerment, which are all very difficult constructs to measure, but also very, very important to track. And then finally, I want to highlight, and this has been discussed quite a lot in today's panel, is the use side of it. Like, you can have great data sets, including gender data sets, but you need to be able to include the feedback loop and ensure that the data that you have is really informing the decision making at the highest level, right? So in terms of, at the policymaking stage, you can think of, asking the hard questions like, will my program work for all population group in need, right? Could it have negative externalities for certain groups who are marginalized? These are all important questions to think and ponder on. I think when we kind of move from this theoretical concept to the practical side of things, things get very murky, and I want to kind of acknowledge that. And that is true for developing countries. I saw there was a question on the chat as well. It is true for even some developed countries as well, right? And I think just in terms of what we have learned from our work in Clear South Asia, just some high-level challenges that we have faced doing this gender transformative work. I think the first is the inadequate data and indicators, right? Oftentimes, the existing data set may lack the gender disaggregated data. Indicators may not capture the complexities of gender dynamics. There are challenges with data quality, and ultimately doing this kind of gender disaggregated, collecting this gender disaggregated data set is very resource intensive. I think the second challenge that we have seen is the resistance to change, because essentially what you are trying to do through your work is you are challenging existing power structures, you are challenging social norms that are deeply entrenched. And so you need strong leadership, you need advocacy efforts, you need culturally sensitive strategies, and you need long-term engagements to make a dent in the wall, so to say. And that really means that it requires a lot of investments in terms of time, in terms of resources. And then finally is the ethics side of it. And I just want to highlight that, issues around privacy, confidentiality, safety, all of this are especially difficult when you are doing this work on the ground. I want to then just quickly spotlight on a couple of pieces of our work that we are currently undertaking at the local level. So the first piece of work that we are doing is with the government of Tamil Nadu. So for those of you who are not familiar with India, Tamil Nadu is the southernmost state in India. It is as big in terms of population density as big as the size of Germany, so to say. So here we are working with the planning department, and here the government is very interested to improve women's agency in the economic domain. And here we are working with the government to help them collect gender sensitive and contextually relevant data. So that's one. The second piece of work is with the Development Monitoring and Evaluation Office, which is the apex eminent body in India, which is housed within Niti Aayog, the erstwhile Planning Commission of India. And here we have provided technical advisory to their staff members on measuring outcomes related to gender disaggregated data, on cross-sectional analysis, as well as on a theoretical understanding of women's empowerment. And then finally, this is a very interesting piece that we are very excited about. And this is, again, at a very nascent stage. We are in early stages of conversation with the government, both at the national level as well as at the state level in India, where we are trying to partner with the Rural Development Department. And the idea is to set up a gender impact lab. This is conceived as a long-term government-wide partnership, which is founded almost in a kind of a 360-degree, deeply embedded life cycle approach, which will enable us to forge linkages between doing the research work, the capacity building, the technical advisory work, as well as the policy advisory to really enable the government to use data for decision-making, and then enable gender transformative policy making in the long run. I just want to end by highlighting some key lessons that we have learned through this work that we have done for more than a decade now in South Asia. I think the first part is you want to be able, we spoke a lot about gender disaggregated data, but what we don't want is to overwhelm the reporting side of things. So you want to prioritize indicators that matter for decision making. The second point is the learning side of monitoring and evaluation, right? So what I want to say is M&E findings is not going to be making the transformative change unless you think about advocacy for gender responsive policies, programs, you think about mobilizing resources for gender equality initiatives, and really promote gender mainstreaming across the development sectors. And then finally, I think when we think about transformational change, right? I think I want us to be bold. I want us to think that, you want to do this work not just for to address women's issues, but also to analyze all policy instruments of state governance. And this gender analysis is really, really crucial for us to really make that transformative change in the long run. That's it from me. Thank you everyone for your time, and thank you to the GI team for having me join in. Over to you, Claudia.
Many thanks, dear Sohini. There's tons of super interesting information in what you have shared, because as I told you before, we're always thinking about, okay, this is good, I like it, I want to be an agent for change, but how do I do it? So I think Florencia's presentation as well as yours help us go there. Like, how should this look like in my own work? How this should look like in my organization, in my national evaluation systems, in my own national evaluation system, and that gives us lots of lights to think about paths and how could I change my own work. So today we have traveled from the global level, from the experience of 7 years already of Global Affairs Canada, to the challenges the UNFPA is facing towards addressing who they're leaving behind in their own work, and how should that be captured by an evaluation proper method or lens. Then we step to the work of UN Women, which I love the way how they incorporate a very interesting view on partners, on alliances, on different actors to address these national evaluation systems in Latin America and hopefully spread to the whole world very soon. And then Sohini let us know about national evaluation systems. How should this look like? What have they learned and what is happening today in India? I'm very happy to hear about that progress. Sohini. However, Dugan said in his intervention that change is not happening fast enough, that the crises are rallying the progress towards gender equality, and we need to act fast. So the invitation is that we have a project ongoing in which you will receive several invitations to address some of the very important points that were raised in the chat. But now we have some time to answer the questions, and I would like to introduce a few questions regarding, first, what comes in the chat about what is feminist evaluation and what is not. It is just one feminist perspective, or there's several, and how they're competing. We do not have the answers to all of that, but we would love to open the space for debate. So this is the invitation, and regarding this, what is the difference between feminist evaluation and gender transformative evaluation? And how could we navigate the decision-making when we have to choose an approach or a way of viewing the evaluation practice? So regarding this question, what's the difference between feminist and gender transformative evaluation? I am opening the floor to you, Silvia, Karen, Sohini, and Florencia, whoever wants to address the question, and Dugan, who wants to complement. Please, the floor is yours. Just open your mic and I will be very happy to hear. Please, who will take the lead?
Okay. I can jump in, give this a try. On the first question on the competing feminisms, what do we mean by feminist evaluation? I would like to share an anecdote, maybe. During our first feminist evaluation, we worked with 4 local feminist evaluators. And one of the comments we received at the end was that we had been a bit pushy with imposing our own perspective of evaluation, of feminist evaluation and feminisms, despite the fact that in one case, it was very interesting because it was working with indigenous women's organizations. And so there was also that extra element there. We took this to heart. And in our second feminist evaluation, when we started working with our local evaluators, one of the first things we did was to open up the discussion, to say, okay, how do you define feminism? What's the difference? What are there differences between the way we see it and you see it? I think we did not solve all the problems, but I think we at least started from a better understanding of maybe when there were some issues or discrepancies. Quickly on, for us, the distinction between feminist evaluation and gender transformative evaluation, I have two possible answers. A very pragmatic one, when we can't use the feminist label, we use maybe the gender transformative or something similar label. The deeper, a bit more thought out answer is that I think that in the feminist evaluation approach, there is much more of that sense of the role of the evaluator as an activist and as having a role in the process compared to the gender transformative. That's how we interpret it. Thank you. But I'm very curious to hear others because it's been a big source of debate.
Yeah, this is controversial. That's why we started with this question. Thank you very much, Silvia. It's a very interesting point of view. Karen, Florencia, Sohini, would you like to add?
Yeah, this is Florencia. So, I mean, I just, want to concur with Silvia. I think, it's a difficult question, but I agree that I think when we talk about feminist evaluation, we are talking a little bit of a, evaluation as a political activity, right? We are seen as activists also when we are evaluating and when we are doing feminist evaluation and pushing a political agenda, which is really related to feminisms. From the UN perspective, this becomes a bit complicated in some cases because we do work very closely with governments, right? And so if there is a big backlash in a government, so perhaps we will use a gender transformative type of evaluation. We still are committed and engaged to promote and to advance an agenda that is related to women's empowerment and gender equality, and we try to do it as best as we can, right? So I think in that sense, I agree with the role of the evaluator as the main difference between these two approaches. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Florencia. Karen, Sohini, would you like to add anything?
Yes,
Sorry, go ahead, Karen.
I'm sorry, Sohini. I picked up something what Florencia said, and this is actually how when we were discussing what is feminist evaluation and gender transformative evaluation within the work of our own office, we recognize that both approaches are, they seek to address gender inequities, but it was what Florencia said that we view that in the lens of a feminist evaluation approach, we view evaluation as more of a social and political exercise versus a technical one. And what I mean by that is that we're using it as a tool to address these power dynamics within the evaluation processes themselves. So taking, for example, this establishment of a steering committee of just rights holders within our evaluation, to engage them in a way that they have not been before, at least within our organization, so that we ensure that, the evaluation process itself is inclusive and equitable. And, turning to gender transformative evaluation, this is an approach that we've used in the past, but it's focusing on just transforming gender norms and the rules and how we can transform them and the power dynamics within the content of the evaluation. So I guess for us, it's much more it's on the focus. So again, us as a role as an evaluator, we can play more of an activist role in addressing these inequities and power dynamics within the process itself. I don't know if that complicates issues, but that's kind of what our
This is a complicated issue, Karen, so don't worry. The idea is to open the floor for debate, and we're doing that greatly. Sohini, you were going to add something, and then I'll pass the floor to Dugan that also wants to add.
Yeah, so I don't want to repeat what I think I think I agree with what others have said, but I think the only thing I would point to is when I was listening in to what Karen and Silvia, when they were talking about and how they were explaining feminist evaluation, I remember I circled the word transformative because they did talk about that lens, right? So I also want us, like, there are a lot of jargons that are used in the sector, so just to be cognizant and not to kind of split hairs and make, like, I think we are in a way referring to similar ideas, so to say. I don't know whether that helps, but yeah.
Of course it does. It helps very much. Thank you. Dugan, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think for us, we consider context to be really the most important thing. And there are contexts in which the notion of feminism is very aligned with people's worldview and the paradigm is very comfortable with it. And then there are contexts where it's not. And in those spaces, gender is, despite the absence of a feminist intent, it's a very important conceptual framework, and it's a very welcome mechanism for people to have awkward conversations. And I think, again, what's been mentioned repeatedly in the chat box is the fact that even feminism itself is a contested concept, and that for different people, feminisms are a diverse range of worldviews. At the GEI, we really seek to be respectful. We seek to be led by our partners, and we want to understand what's going on for them. And for us, I think we don't want to stand in judgment, and we really want to be appreciative of the transformational energy that either of these framings bring. And I think that whether you use this terminology or that terminology, there is a foundational shared value base that we can use as a platform for action. And I just want to say one thing, that COVID was a terrible, terrible experience, but it did introduce the chat box, and the chat on this webinar is on fire. And I'm learning so much from just reading. So thank you. I'll give it back to you, Claudia.
Thank you, Dugan. Yes, and in fact, the invitation today and future invitations to come are willing to address issues like, how do we define feminist evaluation, gender transformative? What's our aim of our work regarding gender equality, among others? So please be aware, just as a little highlight, that the call for proposals for the Global Evaluation Week this year is focused on transformational change. So that would be a very nice space in June to keep the conversation going regarding this. Now passing to a next question, because we always also only get to answer 2 questions and 1 takeaway. The second question that I wanted to ask to our panelists today is, what resources, methods, or approaches would you recommend for our audience to keep looking at and learning to do their own evaluations? So who wants to start with this, recommending resources, points of views, approaches, or methods? Sohini, would you like to start, given that you were the last one in the past?
So I think what I can do is I can share the resources that we have created as public good in the center. And I think some of us have also done it earlier. So yeah, I'll just add in.
Okay, please do. We're waiting for them in the chat. I will also share a very valuable resource that we have in Better Evaluation. So I will put that in the chat so you can take a look at that and open the discussion. Florencia, would you like to follow and recommend a few?
Yes, so from the UN Women side, we have a free online course on how to manage gender responsive evaluation. And this is you can access this through the UN Women Training Center. It's completely free, it's self-paced. We also have a handbook on how to manage gender responsive evaluation, and it has been recently updated into 2022. So with new links there that you can use. We also have, other types of guidances. We have a guidance on good practices. So we have compiled practices in gender responsive evaluations from different organizations and the type of frameworks they have used. There are different frameworks out there that can be used. The one we use the most usually is the Gender at Work framework. That's another very, very good tool to actually conduct these types of evaluations. And finally, I just want to share, Eval Gender Plus, the network for promoting gender responsive evaluation, and, an invitation to all of you to really join that network if you're interested. And so I will share all those resources with the GEI so that they can share with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Florencia. Dear Karen, do you have any additional resources that you would like to share, mention?
Sure. Well, in fact, actually, we've also, so Florencia, we've used some of your tools that you just mentioned. So just to mention perhaps the framework that I referred to in my presentation. So the transformative paradigm, it's I shared it in the link. I don't know if everyone got, but it's a transformative paradigm is more of like a philosophical framework of social change and social justice by Donna Mertens. You know, it can be used, and in our evaluation is an example of that, and adapted to suit whatever your information needs are. It's just really there to provide a framework and inspiration on, you know, where you can serve to, you know, change power imbalances in your methods and in your approach. But that is probably the resource that we used in the biggest resource that we used in the LNOB evaluation.
Okay, thank you very much, Karen. We will be looking for it. There are also some resources appearing in the chat, so I'll encourage you to keep an eye on there. Silvia, would you like to share any additional resources?
Okay, my mic was being very stubborn. Yes, maybe a couple of things. I saw Colton Bridges, also from Global Affairs, has already shared a couple of articles we wrote, mostly in relation to our experience with feminist evaluation, so not really a tool itself. I've shared the link to the GEM tool, so that it's the gender empowerment measurement tool. We have a few things that will be ready to be shared very soon because we're just finalizing the public version of them. One is sort of a bit of an introduction to what we mean by our definition of feminist evaluation at Global Affairs. One is a guide for commissioning and managing feminist evaluations. The third one is that framework that I was mentioning about how to assess locally led development. So it's a bit of a tangent there, but still relevant. So I will make sure to share with GEI as soon as we have them ready.
Thank you very much. We'll collect them and make sure everyone gets these valuable resources. Before we pass to the closing remarks of Dugan, I just wanted to do one very, very quick exercise. I wanted to invite everyone from the audience and also the panelists to think about one word or two words that will reflect the main takeaway that you are taking home from your participation in this webinar. So please, those that are in the audience, share in the chat in one or two words what's the main takeaway from your participation. And for our panelists, please open the mic and share just, I know it's difficult, but just one or two words where you're taking home from this conversation. Florencia, would you like to start? I don't want to put you into...
Yeah, you put me on the... No, that's fine. I think, yeah, you know, working together for more feminist and gender transformative evaluation.
Okay, thank you very much. That's great. Sohini, would you like to follow?
I think the context matters, and I think all of us kind of spoke about it. So yes, that's my big takeaway.
Thank you very much. Silvia, would you like to follow?
Maybe collective responsibility.
Okay, that's nice. I really love that one. Karen, please share with us.
So I guess my main takeaway is that you know, feminist evaluation really forces us to grapple with these complex concepts of power and privilege and social justice. So it really forces us to shift how we conceptualize and conduct our evaluations.
Okay, thank you very much. to everyone. There are some very inspiring takeaways in the chat. Mine is precisely that, inspiration. That's what I'm taking from this conversation. And now I pass the floor to Dugan so he can share his main takeaway and closing remarks. Please, Dugan, the floor is yours.
I want to start by thanking the people who put this event together, principally Claudia, but also the panelists who have been absolutely marvelous. And then there are people behind the scenes like Megan and Sonia who have been remarkable administrators. I want to thank them very much. Secondly, I want to note that we hit 305 participants, which is a lot of people. We're very, very grateful to you for being here. I think that it's evidence that this is something important. I think that people's concerns about the terminology and the language that we use is also very important. I think we are very open to being guided and to get better. I think that men can be feminists. I do not think that feminist evaluation stereotypes people. I think feminist evaluation is intended to liberate people. I want to apologize for the timing glitch. I think if people had hoped to get the whole webinar and joined an hour late, apologies for that. We will try and make sure that the recording is available not only in terms of the visuals, but also in terms of the chat box. And I want to just close by saying that I learn a lot from the chat box. I really do appreciate the things that people highlight. I think that the care feminism takes to be specific about its language is remarkable. I think that you don't have to be a feminist. I think that you can adopt a political orientation that works for you, where you are. But I think the thing that we do all agree on is that we want justice. We want fairness, we want equity, and that gender is an important way of understanding those concepts and to advancing them. I'm going to stop there because if I keep talking, I won't add any more value. But I really just do want to thank you, everybody, for being here. And I want to note that this is going to be a big area of attention for the GEI and our partners. We will be working hard to put resources together that are helpful, and we're going to continue to grow the space because we believe in transformation and we value your participation. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a great Wednesday. And back to you, Claudia.
Thank you very much, Dugan. Thank you, Silvia. Thank you, Karen, Florencia, Sohini, and all the team. And especially thank you to the audience. It was a great, inspiring piece of time that we had here. I really enjoyed it personally, and please be sure that we will go back to you with all the resources and everything that we can extract out of that burning chat that Dugan was just mentioning. Have a very nice Wednesday and the rest of the week, and I hope to see you very soon, at least in the Global Evaluation Week and the next invitations that we can share with you from GEI. A big hug for everyone. Bye-bye. Take good care.